It was a beautiful day at Scifi High School. The sun was shining and the local avians were singing their songs in the treetops, while the students silently attended their classes. In other words, it was the kind of day where seemingly nothing could go wrong. But then a loud voice echoed through the halls of the school asking, "What do you mean my son can't attend your school?" In utter disbelief. The voice came from Principal Hip's office and belonged to a human male. Normally, a reaction like that would have made people cower before the human pair. But this wasn't the first time, nor would it likely be the last time Hip had gotten that reaction. Thanks to that, he managed to remain calm as he said, "I am sorry about this, truly I am. But you can see, we have learned that having a human in a school with any other deaf order species is a recipe for disaster, as the kids say," causing the two humans to just stare at him, entirely caught completely off guard by its answer. But Hip didn't give them any time to process what he had just told them, and just continued with, "Now, I know this is a bit vague, so let me explain. The biggest issues are the gobolds, gremlins, minions, or whatever you call them, since they somehow always either get enlisted by the biggest human prankster in the school, or manage to convince humans into playing some pranks on other students. Of course, all harmless at first, but they inevitably tend to get out of hand quickly, especially if there are any Fae or Pixie students involved or in the school as well. And of course, dealing with the aftermath of these pranks isn't fun, believe me. One of them almost made most of my janitorial staff quit. But the others don't lag far behind them like the Lamias. The problem with them is that they tend to be really overprotective of their human friends, and with how much of a bad rep you humans tend to have with most species, because of how hard you outperform them in their own niche they are so proud of, trouble tends to find you quite quickly, causing the Lamias to intervene. Now, of course, they mean no harm and just want to protect their friends, but sadly they are rather bad at controlling their strength, because of which quite a few of our students have been sent to the hospital already. The Nephilim are worse, though, because they are encouraged to start searching for a partner at a young age. As such, the females tend to start fights between potential mates to find out who is stronger, which of course tends to be more of an issue in schools with teenage students like ours, because giant dragon-like muscle mummies are rather hot, also I've been told by some human students. Though the worst incident was when we had those 5 dreadworm, bullworm, grindelmore, or whatever you want to call them, exchange students, and a human student convinced them to dig an underground base for him, which nearly made the entire school fall into a sinkhole. In short, a lot of the other Death Order species like you humans quite a lot, giving you quite a bit of influence over them, often just by being near them, like in case of the Nephilim or Gobolds. Honestly, a little too much for most people to use responsibly, and sadly my personnel is not trained nor honestly paid enough to handle this. As such, the government has decided that all humans should attend a school specifically made for them." The last part clearly pissed off the two humans, which was of course understandable, since nobody appreciated being segregated off just because of their species. So Hip quickly raised his hands and said, "Now I know that this is complete and utter bullshit, as you humans like to say, but we made sure that the new school is on the grounds of Scifi High School, in addition to making sure that the human students are included in as many school activities as possible. Might seem counterproductive, but we have hired quite a few human teachers that should be able to keep the human students, as well as other Deaf Order students, in line. And honestly, this entire thing is just an excuse to finally give our human students a curriculum that actually challenges them a bit at least. But in the end, we are still trying things out to find out what works and what doesn't, to ensure a good learning environment for our students, humans included. However, we are still quite a ways away from that, and if you don't want to wait for that to be a reality, since there are certainly a lot of options for your son out there, I completely understand. In the end, I am just happy that you considered our school in the first place." Before standing up and extending his hand towards the two humans. They both quickly followed his example, and then shook his hand before the woman said, "You have certainly given us quite a bit to think about, Principal Hip, as well as some good stories to tell our friends. Anyways, we will sleep on it and then contact you in, let's say, a week about our decision." With quite a big honest smile on her face, before both turned to leave. Hip escorted them to the door and wished them a good day, before returning to his desk and sitting down in his old office chair. At this point, peace had returned to Scifi High School, and everything once more looked as peaceful as could be. But the moment Hip thought that, his communicator began to ring, causing him to pick up with a wary, Yes? What is it? Pardon the intrusion, sir, but we have a situation here, and, well, you better come see this yourself, sir, because I honestly have no fucking clue how to handle this, and the janitor wants a word with you anyways. The tired voice of Mr. Drow told him from the other end, which caused Hip to chuckle as he said, Never a boring day with our human students, huh? I'll be there shortly. Before hanging up and then walking out of his office towards the location Mr. Drow had sent him, happily clicking his mandibles as he did, because to him, this was the fun part of his job, seeing what his human students had done this time.